All right, so now I'm going to read something, because never in as long as I have been on Facebook has something been posted 9 times the same story. And it is, I'm just going to read it to you because it is so powerful, and it will tune us to where we're going with the show tonight, which is going to be, there's going to be travel a lot in heart space tonight. But this is a story by a writer named Greg Ray, who I would love to shake hands with someday. It's called The Ocean is Broken. It was published on the site of the Newcastle Herald, that's from Australia, on October the 18th. And that's the title, The Ocean is Broken. It was the silence that made this voyage different from all of those before it, not the absence of sound exactly. The wind still whipped the sails and whistled in the rigging. The waves still sloshed against the fiberglass hull. And there were plenty of other noises, muffled thuds and bumps and scrapes as the boat knocked against pieces of debris. What was missing was the cries of the seabirds, which on all previous similar voyages had surrounded the boat. The birds were missing because the fish were missing. Exactly 10 years before, when Newcastle yachtsman Ivan McFadyen had sailed exactly the same course from Melbourne to Osaka, all he'd had to do to catch a fish from the ocean between Brisbane and Japan was throw out a baited line. Quote, there was not one of the 28 days on that portion of the trip when we didn't catch a good-sized fish to cook up and eat with some rice, McFadyen recalled. But this time, on that whole long leg of sea journey, the total catch was 2. No fish, no birds, hardly a sign of life at all. In the years gone by, I'd gotten used to all the birds and their noises, he said. They'd be following the boat sometimes, resting on the mast before taking off again. You'd see flocks of them wheeling over the surface of the sea in the distance, feeding on pilchards. But in March and April of this year, only silence and desolation surrounded his boat, funnel web, as it sped across the surface of a haunted ocean. North of the equator, up above New Guinea, the ocean racers saw a big fishing boat working a reef in the distance. Quote, all day it was there, trawling back and forth. It was a big ship, like a mother ship, he said. And all night it worked, too, under bright floodlights, and in the morning McFadyen was awoken by his crewmen calling out urgently that the ship had launched a speedboat. Obviously, I was worried. We were unarmed, and pirates are a real worry in those waters, I thought. If these guys had weapons, we were in deep trouble. But they weren't pirates, not in the conventional sense at least. The speedboat came alongside, and the Melanesian men aboard offered gifts of fruit and jars of jam and preserves. And they gave us 2 big sugar bags full of fish, he said. They were good, big fish of all kinds. Some were fresh, but others had obviously been in the sun for a while. We told them there was no way we could possibly use all those fish. There were just 2 of us with no real place to store or keep them. They just shrugged and told us to tip them overboard. That's what they would have done with them anyway, they said. They told us that this was just a small fraction of one day's catch, that they were only interested in tuna, and to them everything else was rubbish. It was all killed, all dumped. They just trawled that reef day and night, stripped it of every living thing. McFadyen felt sick to his heart. That was one fishing boat among countless more working unseen beyond the horizon, many of them doing exactly the same thing. No wonder the sea was dead. No wonder his baited lines caught nothing. There was nothing to catch. If that sounds depressing, it only got worse. The next leg of the long voyage was from Osaka to San Francisco, and for most of that trip, the desolation was tinged with a nauseous horror and a degree of fear. After we left Japan, he said, it felt as if the ocean itself was dead. We hardly saw any living things. We saw one whale, sort of rolling helplessly on the surface with what looked like a big tumor on its head. It was pretty sickening. I've done a lot of miles on the ocean in my life, and I'm used to seeing turtles, dolphins, sharks, and big flurries of feeding birds. But this time, for 3,000 nautical miles, there was nothing alive to be seen. In place of the missing life was garbage in astounding volumes. Quote, part of it was the aftermath of the tsunami that hit Japan a couple of years ago. The wave came over the land, picked up an unbelievable load of stuff, carried it out to sea, and it's all still out there, everywhere you look. Ivan's brother Glenn, who boarded at Hawaii for the run to the U.S., marveled at the thousands and thousands of yellow plastic buoys, the huge tangles of synthetic rope, fishing lines and nets, pieces of polystyrene foam by the million, and slicks of oil and petrol everywhere. Countless hundreds of wooden power poles are out there, snapped off by the killer wave and still trailing their wires in the middle of the sea. Quote, in years gone by, when you were becalmed by lack of wind, you just start your engine and motor on, Ivan said. Not this time. In a lot of places, we couldn't start our motor for fear of entangling the propeller in the mass of pieces of rope and cable. That's an unheard of situation out in the ocean. If we decide to motor, we couldn't do it at night, only in the daytime with a lookout on the bow watching for rubbish. On the bow, in waters above Hawaii, you could see right down into the depths. I could see that the debris isn't just on the surface, it's all the way down, and it's all sizes from a soft drink bottle to pieces the size of a big car or truck. We saw a factory chimney sticking out of the water with some kind of boiler thing still attached below the surface. We saw a big container-type thing just rolling over and over in the waves. We were weaving around these pieces of debris. It was like sailing through a garbage dump tip. Below decks, you were constantly hearing things hitting against the hull, and you were constantly afraid of hitting something really big. As it was, the hull was scratched and dented all over the place from bits and pieces we never saw. Plastic was ubiquitous, bottles, bags, and every kind of throwaway domestic item you can imagine, from broken chairs to dustpans, toys, and utensils, and something else. The boat's vivid yellow paint job, never faded by sun or sea in years gone past, reacted with something in the water off Japan, losing its sheen in a strange and unprecedented way. Back in Newcastle, Ivan McFadyen is still coming to terms with the shock and horror of the voyage. The ocean is broken, he said, shaking his head in stunned disbelief. Recognizing the problem is vast and that no organizations or government appear to have a particular interest in doing anything about it, McFadyen is looking for ideas. He plans to lobby government ministers, hoping they might help. More immediately, he will approach the organizers of Australia major ocean races, trying to enlist yachties into the international scheme that uses volunteer yachtsmen to monitor debris and marine life. McFadyen signed up to the scheme while he was in the U.S., responding to an approach by U.S. academics who asked yachties to fill in daily survey forms and collect samples for radiation testing, a significant concern in the wake of the tsunami and consequent nuclear power station failure in Japan. I asked them, why don't we push for a fleet and go clean up the mess, he said. But they said they'd calculated that the environmental damage from burning the fuel to do that job would be worse than just leaving the debris there. This one has truly gone viral like nothing I have ever seen on Facebook. It's up on my Facebook page, Michael C. Ruppert, now. Until you change the way money works, you change nothing. The price of tuna and food, money, the power that's behind the money when people are now beginning to realize that starvation is at hand. Of course, the tuna are mostly radioactive now anyway. Speaks everything that they considered all the other life they had taken, including probably the death of the coral reef itself and all the other living things, to be just trash. And isn't that the world we're living in? And when you sail across an ocean filled with trash, you see the logic of the infinite growth paradigm.
You've got the laws of the land. 2, number 2, you got the drives of a man. 3, number 3, you got a tug-of-war struggle. 2 sides of one heart spells trouble. Woe to the ship that sails and those